Today, I'm going to tell you about a smart and effective tool to work with repetitive losses on a continuous basis. It's called the Kaizen story in 12 steps. Last year, one of our converting factories figured out how to achieve considerable savings by increasing the reuse of printing plates by over 8%. How did they do it? Well, yes, you've guessed it, with the Kaizen 12 steps. So today, we're going to take a closer look and see how Kaizen works, step by step. Step 1 is about identifying the loss you want to focus on. In this case, the factory's WCM pillar wanted to focus on print media as part of their overall cost optimization strategy. But this could mean many things. So, the second step is about narrowing down your scope to a specific area. In this case, the WCM pillar narrowed down their scope from print media to printing plates. They estimated that plate recovery and reuse could be increased from 57% to 62%, and that this would generate considerable savings. Before making any changes, it's important to know how the process and the equipment should work under optimal circumstances. When you do this, remember to consider all the 4 M's. In this case, the team learned that print operators were meant to follow a clearly defined set of rules when deciding whether to scrap or reuse printing plates. Step 4 is a reality check. What is actually going on here? Does the practice match the theory? The only way to really find out is to go to the Gemba. By the end of this step, you want to understand the phenomenon, that is, the failure mode or modes that are causing the problem. A good tool to use here is the 5 W's and 1 H. In the printing plates case, it emerged that the operators were not adhering to the criteria, but using their own subjective judgment when deciding whether or not to reuse plates. So let's do a quick recap. In steps 3 and 4, you saw what is supposed to happen and compared it to what is actually happening. You identified the phenomenon. Well, now you can go back and check the original target, which was set by the WCM pillar. Is it still achievable in the light of this phenomenon? Well, in this case, the team and the pillar decided it was fine, so a 62% recovery rate became the formal target for the project. In step 6, the Kaizen team creates a realistic time plan for the remaining steps and agrees it with the WCM pillar. Now you have your phenomenon statement. The next step is to identify the root cause or causes. Use the WCM tools, typically the 4 M's and the 5 Y's, to get to the bottom of the problem. Once you've done this, you can start to identify relevant countermeasures. The countermeasure ladder will help you evaluate how reliable your proposed solutions are. In step 8, the Kaizen team decides which countermeasures will be the most impactful, with an eye on cost reduction, time, and how difficult they are to implement. In other words, they do a cost-benefit analysis on each countermeasure. This was the situation in the printing plate case. Plates were being discarded, even though they were still okay to reuse. Operators were judging subjectively when a plate could be thrown away just from looking at it. And here's an example of a countermeasure proposed by their Kaizen team. To put RFID tags on each plate and sleeve to track how many kilometers of paperboard had been printed from each one. Why? Because that would give the operators an objective fact upon which to base their decision to scrap or reuse plates. Step 9. At last it's time to implement the countermeasures. Be sure to create and then follow a strict plan for this. The plan should include not just a list of actions, but also timings and, crucially, the name of the person who is responsible for each action. As a rule, it's better to do one thing at a time, and that way you know which measure is yielding which results. Also, note that success often depends on the empowerment of the team. They have to own the countermeasures themselves in order to be motivated to really ensure it works. Are your countermeasures delivering the results you hoped for? It's time to check. In step 10, you go back to the target and see how you're doing. Let's assume your countermeasures are working. You're doing things differently and reducing losses. And that's great. But how do you make sure the good results last? Standardization is the answer. With the Kaizen story, as with all WCM improvements, it's important not just to create a new standard, but to define the routines needed to maintain it. In the printing plate case, the team defined a new process. They got all the operators, design and quality departments on board, and they built an information system to capture the data. Now they collect data on all the plates that are reused or not reused. Constant tracking and follow-up are the keys to continued success. Kaizen is Japanese for continuous improvement. In other words, the story doesn't end here. It's important to keep working on eradicating other repetitive losses and to share your insights with other Tetra Pak factories. So this was a classic case for the WCM Kaizen story in 12 steps. It led to an improvement in print plate recovery rates and big savings for the factory. Now, how could you use Kaizen in your work?